Do you ever have that shelf of books and they're just unread and they're just staring back at you like, yeah, me too. So today, my goal is to combat that TBR one book at a time. And without further ado, here's my May TBR. And I am going to start with the books that I have read in the month of May, since it is well, my date right now is May 20th. So the first book I read was The Brain That Changes Itself by Norman Doidge. So this book is basically about neuroplasticity and how the brain can rewire itself, and it's through all stages of life and everything like that. And it's not just the brain, it's also like your peripheral nervous system, which is like your nerves, and like efferent, afferent. If you take any psych or bio class, then you would know what I'm talking about. But this is honestly a book, if you haven't taken a bio or neuropsych or any like background, like basic background, you would probably be able to read this, because his writing is very like novelistic, I would say. Like, he goes into the patient's background and he relates it to our society. And it is written in 2005, so that is important to keep in mind. Um, but also, you can see the differences of the science from then to today. And I feel like there's much improvement today, but it's a good like foundation if you want to like get into neuroplasticity. And I would say this is almost like a self-help book, but it is not really self-help. It's more like scientific nonfiction purpose of like informing about neuroplasticity. But I can easily use like the things that he says in here in my real life, and like rewire my own brain and get rid of bad habits and things like that. And it offers like valuable insight, I would say. And honestly, I love like his writing and how he makes it like very novelistic. Like, he doesn't straight out say, oh, these are the people who is like we're researching, and then just does like a step by step case study. It's like getting into their livelihoods and like what they have dealt with in their past, and helps us like piece it together what is happening, like a mystery novel, but every chapter it's a different mystery. So yeah, so this is the overview of the book. And yeah, but I have read it, as I've said. And why I was recommended it to me by like this thing called Tolan, which I use for studying, and it's an AI app, like an assistant app, sort of like to help students study or like get through basic tasks and things like that, or like create schedules. It's honestly very helpful, and it gives me book recommendations too, which is really nice. But yeah, so I enjoy this book, and I would recommend it to audiences who are not necessarily knowledgeable in psychology and neuroscience. But if you're a student like me, then I would definitely recommend it, because I'm a cognitive science student and I enjoyed it thoroughly, because all of the stuff that he says in this book has like popped up in my class, and I honestly love that. So if you're interested in like psychology or like neuropsych or things like that, you would enjoy this book. And I feel like the general audience would honestly enjoy it as well, because yeah, it's honestly like not too heavy into the science, but it is still heavy. Like, they give you definitions and you had to keep track if you haven't had any like neuroscience experience. But it's honestly like a good read once you like get the hang of like the lingo and things like that. And I'm pretty sure, yeah, he has an appendix at the end. Hold on. He has like citations and stuff. So there's like an appendix at the end. And yeah, so I would recommend this for people who love science and love self-help science and things like that, because it's honestly a very intriguing like topic. But yeah, so moving on to the next book. So the next book I want to recommend is Binding 13 by Chloe Walsh. And this basically takes place in Ireland around 2005. So it follows the story of Shannon, who basically just transfers into Toman College, and there's this rugby star named Johnny Kavanagh who is also playing in the school's team. And basically, it follows like their stories individually, where like they aren't like, it's not like your quickie romance where it's like, oh, they get together and then they have a third act breakup and then, oh, they live happily ever after. This is more of their like stories individually, but they do have moments together. Like there is romance, and it's more like um kind of like having a crush. It's like the realistic version of a story of when you have a crush and like you don't want to confess anything before the other does, and like no one confesses. But yeah, so that's basically this story. And I would like to preface that this is a book for people 16 and or older. Firstly, the beginning page states it and says it's suitable for 16 plus, solely because of the themes that are being portrayed here. Most of the themes are like centered around emotional abuse and physical abuse and like bullying, and also there is some like sexual language. I don't believe there's much sexual content. So there's not like going to be like any spice or anything in this book, except maybe in the end, but it depends on what your level of spice. If you're looking for something purely like not not spicy at all, like no sex whatsoever, then I wouldn't say this would be like fully clean, but it would be, there's going to be mentions of it. So, yeah, if you're fine with that, then go right ahead. But it's honestly like the storyline is really good because it focuses on Shannon's storyline, which I found super interesting and like very realistic, I would say. Like, it's not glorifying her abuse, I don't feel. But it's mostly like showing like the realistic, and you kind of feel like you're in her head where it's like you're stuck in this like sort of loop kind of thing. So I feel like it's not glorifying abuse, which is the most important thing. And also it shows like the downsides, like the emotional, psychological aspects of bullying and abuse, and brings awareness to that, which I think is really important to show if you're writing any story based on trauma. And also, like, Johnny's story is like equally as captivating because it shows his academic pressures and how he's struggling and everything like that. So I think that is like really useful because both of the characters are developing in their own kind of storylines, and it's not like one is completely perfect and the other is like struggling so hard, but they're both equally struggling, but in different ways, if that makes sense. But yeah, so that is Binding 13. I have read it and I honestly loved it. And it seems like a very large book, as you can see, but it honestly is like easy to read, I would say, like easier for me to read. So I got through it in a day, I would say, but obviously everyone has their own reading pace, so it's a good plot, I would say, and like probably a better romance than I have read in a while. So, yeah, I would recommend this for audiences who do enjoy like easy reading romances, but also want that kind of like character or depth and like development and all that. But yeah, that is Binding 13. Okay, so now we're getting into the books that I haven't read yet, but I'm planning to read in summer, like May. So these ones, I would say these are classics, and they're more like dense. So if you love like classical literature, you would have like seen these titles or even read these titles. But yeah, so jumping into it, the first book I have here is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Brontë. And basically, it is a classical romance novel, like classical fiction, I would say. and it follows the story of an orphan named Jane and how she navigates like her life as an orphan and like through the home and things like that. And it says in the back, she endures loneliness and cruelty of the home, and she eventually meets Rochester, which is like, if you don't know, I like searched it up and like saw like the synopsis, and it said that he was the love interest in the story. So it's basically in all like the synopsis, so you can't really avoid that. So it's not like a love triangle situation, but yeah. So basically, she meets Rochester, and it shows like a bit of romance, but it's mostly about her loneliness and cruelty. And yeah, I was drawn to this book because of my love for classical literatures. I love Jane Austen, um, and I wanted to jump into something other than Jane Austen, and I decided to go with the Bronte sisters. And yeah, so this is like me getting back into classical literature, basically. But yeah. All right, so my next book that I want to read in May is The Pictures of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. This one I would say majority of people know, like especially if you're into like classical literature. It's like basically like some like everyone says that they love like this book and things like that. So basically it's following like the story of this guy named Dorian Gray who loves his beauty so much that his friend Basil Hallward, Hallward, he paints a portrait of Dorian, and so Dorian basically admires this like painting all the time, and like it kind of gets to his head because he feels like he's so beautiful, and like the picture starts to mysteriously change as Dorian does like very immoral things. And it's kind of like a philosophical like story, I would say. Like it's like showing how vanity can affect your life, and like how vanity is like not as, it's like, I mean it is a sin, but vanity is like can overlook your inner beauty, I would say. But yeah, I am excited to read it, and I'll give you a more like philosophical take on it after I've read it. But this is basically me going off of the synopsis. So I'm assuming it is basically about your outer beauty versus your inner beauty and like vanity and how that affects things, and probably about naivety because Dorian is a very naive character. But I'll let you know, guys, know how it goes. And yeah, so with that all said, thank you so much for watching. And if you like content like this, make sure to like, and if you want to see more from me, make sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications. Otherwise, follow my Instagram where everything is mainly happening. And yeah, thank you so much, and see you guys next time. You know it,